Hey, this is Christian Buckley, Microsoft Regional Director and MVP, and I'm interviewing Mark Kashman, a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Microsoft, on the topic of Microsoft lists and files in Microsoft Teams as part of the ESPC community. Hey, Mark, thanks for meeting with me.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad that I made your list of people to talk to getting ready for ESPC to talk about lists.
I would if I have my little wah wah sound. So,
Hey,
but
one out of
let's
10,
jump.
1 out of
Yeah,
10.
let's jump right into it. Here's question number one. For people using SharePoint lists, why would they want to look at Microsoft lists?
Aha, so with SharePoint lists being in market for some 15 years, we saw that it was a time when we would really take some serious feedback on the usability and the accessibility of how people could create lists and use them. So Microsoft Lists is an evolution of SharePoint lists, and there's a bunch of questions that sort of pop up with that. You know, what is Microsoft Lists? What's new about it? And the really easy answer is there's a new way of getting to your lists, all of your lists. There's a new home. We call it the Lists app for Microsoft 365. There's that deep integration with Microsoft Teams that really was there, but more from a consumption perspective. Now you can actually create a new list in Microsoft Teams with the Lists app. And also we've got a mobile app that's coming. So the next tier of that is just there's a lot of functionality that's just going to make it a lot more beautiful to look at your lists, easier to use, easier to share. But the real core question I think that's in the back of people's minds that's more of the concern is I've been using lists for a really long time. What do I have to do to move to Microsoft Lists, or how do I prepare? And the simple answer is nothing. They really will just get the new capabilities. You'll see your existing lists on the lists home. You'll see them when the mobile app, if you try the preview or coming later this year, it'll be standard offering. And anything you do in Microsoft Teams is really connected to that team site behind the scenes. And so it's there, it's accessible to the team members, and it's no different from any other type of content, but it's unique in terms of a best way to track information.
I should say I do like the lists home experience as well, but just like you said, went in there, found my other lists, the existing lists within that, and so it's really easy to go and navigate across that, and of course have your individual lists through the Teams experience as well.
Yeah. So everything's at your fingertips. Should be a lot easier for people to create with the new ready-made templates. When you go in and start working with columns, they've done a ton of work with the quick edit experience. It's a lot faster. They've done a lot of work just around look and feel. So if you like the conditional formatting, there's new styles, there's lots of colors, and there's ways to, when things change in your list, to make it look like that.
So marketing people will love it because there's a lot of bright colors and shiny
Yeah.
things, and that's why I like.
But everything beyond marketing, there's all the things that developers could do with lists that continues. Everything that IT could do with lists to help get teams set up, to manage, control, obviously anything around auditing, reporting, searching. The functionality is all there because lists were already very robust. Now they're just becoming friendlier and easy to get to even outside of SharePoint.
So question number two.
Yeah.
So there's also the personal list, the ability to create personal lists. So not just things that you're doing in Teams for your work team. So how are these managed differently? Is there what's different about them than what you do inside of Teams, inside of the team space?
Yeah, when it comes to creating a list, you have two options. Like you said, there's the ability to create a personal list or one that's already available to the team. And one of our big entry points we mentioned was that ability to create from within Microsoft Teams. But that gets put into SharePoint. A personal list gets put into SharePoint. SharePoint is that common platform for both of them. But when I create a personal list, same as when I put files in my individual OneDrive, they're owned by me and they aren't available to people until I share them. So even though it's more of a concern than I think a reality, when somebody creates a personal list, there is that concern of, well, how can IT manage that? There's a ton of value for the end user because it just may be something they're tracking that really isn't meant for a particular team. So where would you put it? Now I can just put it in my personal list or what we call my lists. And if I want to share it, I can share it to an individual. I can share it to a group. And we're even thinking in terms of some of the early feedback of being able to move a personal list into a team space. But that's something that isn't yet in product. But the thing I think that is really that concern, or that initial perception from IT, is what happens when an individual leaves the company? How can we control and manage, even if they're in the company, what they're doing with their personal lists? And we're very mindful to take some of the early feedback, and the team is already reviewing how we can mostly let IT identify who is able to create a personal list. Same as today when you go to create a team or create a SharePoint site, you can control and manage based on a security group who can actually create. So if that's something that helps, and we've gotten that early feedback that yes, that is the control we're looking for. The assumption with the other areas, SharePoint, people have already been doing that for years. That doesn't change. Or if you were to create a new list inside of Microsoft Teams, it's already getting created to a shared space that everybody knows how to govern, control, manage, and so that doesn't change anything there.
So question number 3. So how are Microsoft Planner and Microsoft Lists different, and how much are they the same?
Yeah, and I'll even step on the mind just a little bit more and think if you put in Microsoft To Do into that mix, because a lot of that perception, especially visually when you see lists, it looks similar to Planner, and I think it looks to some extent similar to To Do in the structure of just the visual nature. It is a friendlier UI, and it looks like there's sets of information that you can check off. But the reality is Microsoft Lists is not designed to be a tasks app. And so if you look at the tagline for Planner, it's to help you manage shared plans, so essentially Teams tasks or team tasks. And with To Do, it's a summary of anything that's a task you've either assigned yourself or comes from Planner because it was a part of a team plan. But it really is very task oriented, and I don't mean that as a belittling type statement, because truly a task is important, but commonly when you complete a task, it disappears from view. It doesn't get deleted, but you know what I mean. It disappears from view. But you can do really powerful things like assign a task, track it to completion. With lists, though, and this is where, when you think about the history of lists, yes, there was a tasks list in classic SharePoint. But the real value is what type of information that's not a task can you create in a list? And that's hundreds, if not thousands, of ideas. And we have templates that maybe are a great start to understand. You can track physical assets that have more of a nature of being checked in or checked out to individual people, out for repair, back from repair. And none of that is really a task per se. It's just tracking and checking out the metadata of an item, the item being maybe a physical tablet that's in a truck delivery. The other might just be issue tracking. Somebody's on site and there's an item that needs to be repaired. And so that's going to trigger maybe somebody to go and order a new part, assign somebody to then go on site and fix it. And there may be little tasks oriented to that, but you're really tracking the item, which is the repair item, and the status of the workflow, which I think is the biggest differentiator, which I kind of saved till the latest, is how much you can customize lists. So you know this, but just to be real clear, you can customize the form, which really means you can track more information than you're provided out of the box. So with To Do and Planner, you've got a pretty set amount of fields that you fill out. With lists, you can create a form or collect fields of information to your heart's content. We know that sometimes some of these list row items can be 70 columns wide, which doesn't necessarily mean it's super easy, but if it's really important, it means you can do it. And then off of that, of course, is the ability to tie some form of a workflow to it. And that might be the collection of data over time, or when the status changes, somebody gets alerted, a part gets ordered, some status. So what really that leads me into is that connection of lists with the Power Platform. And that just means it's a custom place to build your custom forms to a custom flow that really takes it out of what a task management app even does. And hopefully the differentiation is the type of information you're tracking.
One of the comments that I heard when the Lists app was announced and people were excited about it, one of the first questions I heard was actually from a project MVP who asked, is there any discussion? He was kind of asking out loud within the community, not to the product team, of whether there were plans to be able to take a line item on a list and move that over and create a task. So to export that or somehow to change its status over and merge it over.
Mm-hmm.
But then somebody else in the community responded and kind of went the Power Platform route and said, well, look, there's a lot of automation you can do, which can also kick off a tasks.
Yep.
So there are things that you could do, but I've not gone in and looked in user voice, or I'm not aware of any public roadmap around, deeper integration and connection between the two. Is there anything that you could talk about?
What we've lightly said in one of our Ask the Experts during the recent Ignite conference was that notion of those teams are talking. We have technology today that's pretty straightforward. You can add a comment to a list. Even if it's outside of Teams, it's really just a special column that allows you to hold a conversation on a list item. So pretty straightforward. What we talked about as coming as one of the announcements for List was the ability to @mention somebody in comments. Not mind-blowing, because certainly we do that in a lot of places, but again, at a list item level, to be able to say, hey, Christian, can you check out this? The numbers seem a little funny. And then you could go in, and if the numbers were really different, that might trigger somebody to go, oh, wow, we're over the 150 threshold. So there's a lot of value in drawing people in. So what usually comes next in what we've built is you comment @mention, and if it's important enough now, like you can in Word, you can assign that off of the comment, assign it as a task, which then will flow into where the person consumes their task. It might be a task in Outlook, it might be a task in Word, it might be a task in Planner, but To Do would give you a summary, and this becomes a part of that tasks service. So I can't break any news there, but I think the assumptions that you might be able to make is in that flow of creating a comment, @mentioning somebody, and creating that as a task. I think that's where the teams are talking, and I hope to be able to present and put something on the roadmap that would say, and now off of a list item, you can create a task. It's not too far from the tech. It's just it'll take time for them to commit to.
I was thinking like in Outlook as well. And, the AI is able to pull out when somebody assigns something and it says, hey, is this a new task that needs to be created from that?
Yeah.
Again, we're not far away from having that. Logically, the capability is there. It's just a matter of is the will is there for Microsoft to go and build it.
The will is always of the people, and that you've even considered it or heard it in the community. I can tell you again, that is why we talked about it during the Ask the Experts, because it was a question from the community. And to hear our tasks expert, which if in the community you know Howard Crow, he manages the project planner and is closely aligned with To Do as well, and everything we're doing as tasks in Teams. So this is pretty right up the alley of whatever content type you're talking about, tying it to the discussion, that's Teams value, associating it to something that's then important enough to assign somebody as a task to mainly remind them and get it on their to-do list, if that's a fun way to say it. I think is a really important way that they're thinking about how that task service, whether it's uber AI driven, like you were just mentioning, or a very explicit thing where you go and you create a task. Right in the middle, I think, is where we all play as the other apps that can contribute to that. And again, back to the Word example, if you're commenting on a blog that I wrote and you @mention somebody to draw them in, there's now just that little checkbox currently for Word Online, but certainly more pervasive in the notion of that coming to other locations.
That's a great engagement capability. So really excited about those features.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to us about the Microsoft Lists app and files and Microsoft Teams. And Mark Kashman, thanks a lot for your time.
You bet. Thanks a lot.